Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. It's time for another Konmari craft room chat. It is getting into fall time, and I wanted to talk about, not that it's fall, this goes for any time of year, ownership versus access today, because I think there are so many more resources available now than we had even 10 or 20 years ago that it really eliminates a need for us to own as many things as we used to. And where ownership might be right for one person, it might be completely wrong for somebody else. For instance, I live in a fairly remote part of the world. Well, I guess it's not that remote, but you know, compared to a lot of people, I'm not in a city or anything. I'm not walking distance from any stores or anything like that. So for me, owning a vehicle, owning a car is important. But somebody living in like Boston or New York or a city with, even Bangor, a place with public transportation, you wouldn't necessarily need to own a vehicle. So like that's a very simple one to kind of figure out. It's like, for what I would pay in cab fare or bus passes, would it be worth spending the extra to have a car? I mean, for me, it definitely would. If I had to take a taxi to town every time I needed to go, because there's no buses around here, it would cost a fortune. So obviously it makes sense for me to own a vehicle. And I also like the freedom. I wouldn't be comfortable not having a car because I've always lived in the country, and I value that freedom. Owning a home. I mean, if you're somebody who changes jobs a lot or is younger, not sure where you want to end up, buying a house is probably not a great idea, because you're going to be, you need to be there at least 7 years to break even on your investment, and it's a big burden to try to sell it and to buy it, and it's a lot of headache, and you know, it's not something you want to go into very lightly. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because there are a lot of other opportunities that we have to access stuff that we might not think about. The library would be a really good example. So before I buy a book, I'll often see if I can borrow it from the library first to see if it's something that I would want to keep. Often if it's if it's fiction, I'm only going to want to read it once, so borrowing from the library or the library online works perfectly for me. But if it's like a reference book, that's something I would most likely want to keep and want to refer back to, so it makes sense for me to own it. So when you're looking at something to purchase, think about if you can access it or if you need to own it. For instance, I was out shopping with my girlfriends the other day. We'd all gone out to lunch together, and we thought we'd stroll through a couple craft stores, and we were just kind of chatting and having a good time, and we all started looking at the same stamp set, and so we started, are you gonna buy that? Or am I gonna buy that? Oh, she's gonna buy that. So that's like, we all have it. So, and that's kind of like an understanding that we have, that if one of us has it, then the rest of us can borrow it. So by that, we are able to expand our access to the supplies that we own, or that we have, without spending extra money or without filling our house up with more things. Because if you look at it, I mean, if I just turn the camera a little bit here, I think it's, let me see if I can just turn it. All those binders, those are all stamp sets, and I have a lot of them, and I've got all those wooden stamps behind me. So essentially, all of my friends have all of these stamps too, and I also have all the stamps and dies that they have, so we share. So if you have other friends that have similar interests that you could borrow things from, then you essentially can have a whole lot more options, a whole lot more access without actually having to store it in your home and own it. So kind of think about that before you go and buy something. During that same shopping trip, one of my friends asked me what I thought of of a certain brand of marker. Have you tried them? What do you think? And they were the chameleon pens, which are a very unusual type of alcohol pen. And I said, well, tell you what, why don't you borrow mine and see if you like them before you invest, because they're kind of expensive, and they are kind of counterintuitive if you've already begun coloring with, you know, regular Copics or other alcohol pens. So she doesn't have to go and spend any money on a small package. She can try mine, and if she likes it, then she can go and purchase them for herself if she feels like she needs to own them. For, you know, most things, if you're only going to use it a couple times a year, you could just borrow it. I think about these, I was very excited about kayaking. So every summer, my family, we rent a cabin on a lake, and we spend a week there, and it's wonderful. And we always toy with the idea, boy, wouldn't it be nice to buy a place like that? But then when you think about it, you think of the taxes you have to pay. You're only able to use it a couple months out of the year because, you know, with the snow, the roads are impassable during the winter for a lot of lakes and camps in Maine. So for just a couple months of use, you're paying taxes all year. You've got to keep the pipes from freezing. You have to fix anything that's broken. You have to spend so much much of your time, because you're an owner of a property, just maintaining it, that you don't get to enjoy it. Whereas we rent it for a week, we enjoy it the entire week, and then we leave and we have no headaches. We don't have to think about it again until the next time we go. So for us, accessing that once a week, once a year is perfect, rather than owning it the entire year and having to have the mental burden, the financial burden, and just kind of the anxiety of worrying about it when we're not there. So there's a perfect example where accessing is better than owning. Of course, we run the risk that the owner may sell that camp and we may never be able to access it again, but we can pretty confidently say that we would be able to rent a very similar place if that happens. So, you know, there's a little bit of a risk with choosing to borrow or access or rent versus own, but generally the risk is greater when you own something, unless you're absolutely sure that it's something that you want long term. So because I live in a state and I live so close to many ponds and lakes, we have a couple kayaks. And honestly, the amount we use these kayaks, I would have been better off just to borrow a neighbor's kayak for the few times that I want to use it. So I either need to do one or two things. I need to use my kayak more. I mean, I do like the fact that I have them, I can throw them in the truck and I can go kayaking whenever I want. But on the other hand, it does seem a little foolish because we don't use them all that often. I'm not going to sell them. I definitely get the value out of them for what I've paid for them, and I have room to store it, so it's all good. But, you know, knowing what I know now, it probably would have been better for me just to borrow it. So I want you to think about that. Are there any things that you have wanted to have but you now realize that you could just borrow? Or are there things that you purchased because you thought you had to have them and you ended up not using them so much, so you wish that you borrowed them? And you might also reach out to your friends and see if you guys want to swap supplies now and again, so that you can improve your access to supplies, have more options, but yet not spend more money or clog up your home with more things. So, I mean, I think the whole like sharing economy has really been growing lately. If you look at the popularity of companies like Uber, where, you know, anybody could be an Uber driver, share your vehicle with other people, you know, drive them around, so they don't have to own a car and you get financially compensated for that. Or Airbnb, where people, you know, rent out their homes or spare rooms in their homes to people that are traveling so they can save money. I mean, that's very appealing to a younger generation. For me, I find that a little sketchy. I shouldn't. I've only heard good things about it, but like when I went to Denver and I had to take an Uber because that was part of the deal where I was filming, they were sending me home in an Uber, and I was like horrified. I was just like convinced that there was going to be an axe murderer driving this Uber. Anybody can be an Uber driver. This could be a completely sketchy person. I was like so freaked out. It was fine, but like I think my generation and probably older have a little bit more distrust of sharing with strangers. But I can definitely see that the millennials have definitely embraced a more communal style of living, and I think that's why Airbnb and Uber are so popular. I probably will never rent an Airbnb. I still feel like a hotel has like checks and balances and health inspections and stuff like that, but I think that's probably just my hang up. And but I think, you know, we can all find places in our life where we can, you know, share with our friends and neighbors a little bit more without it, you know, harming us one single bit. Like if I lend you this stamp, I'm not gonna have less of a stamp when you bring it back. I mean, you'll stamp it, it'll stamp forever. You know, I'm not out anything, you're not out anything. You get the benefit of being able to use this. Maybe I would get the benefit of borrowing a die or something like that. So just think about your access before you go and buy something. See if it's something that you can share or make better use of. Maybe you get together with a bunch of friends and you meal prep, and then you divvy up the spoils so that you all have different meals all week, but you've only expended one bit of work. Now that's not exactly, I mean, you've all obviously bought ingredients and done that, but you've been able to share the work so that you all get access to all of these different meals, but you've only had to cook one meal, and you all benefit. So, you know, you only had to buy one set of supplies, you only had to cook one meal. I mean, if you think of that. Another thing that like me and my girlfriends do sometimes, we're all like pattern paper addicts. I mean, I have to stop. I have to like not look because I love pattern paper. So sometimes what we do is we'll each buy a pad of paper, and then we'll go through and we'll divvy it up, because often they have like 3 or 4 prints per pad. So we'll just go through and we will just keep one of each print for ourselves and give the other to the other girls in the group. and that way we had the access to all these patterns, but we only had to buy one paper, and best of all, we don't have a bunch of wasted paper. We don't have a bunch of half-full paper pads in our stash when we're done. We are consuming what we can realistically use, which is another way to look at this. So you don't have to be all, you know, hippy-dippy, peace, love, flower child to embrace this idea. There's certainly a way that it can work for you, whether it's borrowing a few more books from the library or renting or a few movies on Amazon versus buying a physical copy. There's definitely ways that, you know, you can make it work for you. And then you can also see if something is worth owning. Like for me, there's a couple TV shows that I absolutely own. Like I love the TV show Firefly. It's one of my favorite TV shows. I own that on DVD. TV show Lost, I own all those series on DVD. I don't have to own Buffy the Vampire Slayer on DVD because my sister has it. So I can access that anytime I want, even if it's not streaming anywhere. So, and you also have to look at your time. It's like, can you reasonably use all these things that you've acquired? I mean, how many times am I going to watch a series of Lost? I mean, that's a commitment. That's like, that is a long show. We watched it when it was on, you know, on TV. And I think I've maybe watched the series one more time after that. But I do like knowing that I can go back, because I'm a little, I'm a little like sketchy on the details of the last couple seasons, because I think I got a little overwhelmed with all the different stuff going on. But that's a tangent. Well, I always end up on these tangents at the end of the video. Hopefully I got all the good stuff in at the beginning for the people that have obviously clicked away by now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So in the comments below, I'd love to know what you borrow instead of buy, because just doing a little bit of that is going to help your budget. It's going to help your home be more spacious, and you actually might find your relationships improve. If you have a friend that you can say, hey, can I borrow your crock pot this weekend? And would you like to borrow my, I don't know, cookbook? I'm never lending cookbooks and crock pots, so I'm just saying that like, yeah, I don't cook that much, but I do actually have a couple crock pots if anyone wants to borrow one. But you know, you can help relationships that way. If you are, you know, knocking on a friend's door instead of running to the supermarket, you know, that's a chance to have a cup of coffee with a friend. That's a chance to catch up, and it's a chance to help each other. And I think the more that we spend interacting with one another versus shopping, it's going to be better for everybody. And we're going to have more money in our pockets, we're going to have more love in our hearts, and the world's going to be a happier place because we're going to be making real connections with people. And it's all because we decided to borrow something instead of buy it, because we don't need to own everything if we can access it. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you like these Konmari craft room video. This has nothing to do with crafts really, except for borrowing supplies. But anyway, if you like these, let me know in the comments below too. Give me a thumbs up, and until next time, happy crafting.